Hey, we're back here in Chapter 5, Let's Entertain You of Active Physics. Today we're going to cover two sections in this video. Section 6, which is about reflection, and Section 8, which is about refraction. Very important topics your students need to know, part of our standards and part of what they're going to be tested on. So Section 6 is all about the reflection of light, the law of reflection. Students are going to be using lasers and mirrors. I just want to show you a bit about what they're going to be doing here. It's always good to see how to set this up. So they're going to be using a mirror, and what I do as the first tip I want to give you is I like to use graph paper. It gives them some lines of reference as far as where they could place the mirror, so it's on a straight line there. Tracing the mirror as a line of reference for the students, so after they're done and remove the mirror, they know where the mirror was. And then drawing that normal line, that perpendicular line, that dotted line students are going to draw, and they're going to use that to shine the actual laser at, so later they can measure the angles. So first little tip here is when they're holding the mirror. Now, if they have the mirror holders, the Active Physics does have these little plastic mirror holders, that's great. But if those do get lost, the student can simply hold the mirror. And these mirrors you can get, from a dollar store if you happen not to have any in your kit or whatever. But if they hold the mirror slightly down, so it's angled a little bit down towards the paper, that tends to make the reflected angle a bit easier to see. So a little tip there. All right, another thing they're going to be using here is a glass rod. And the glass rod, if you don't have one for some reason, borrow one from the chemistry teacher. They do make the laser beam very easy to see. It spreads out that beam. And the safety issue here is the glass, working with glass. So the mirror, being careful with the edges, if any sharp edges, making sure they don't drop or handle the mirror rough so it doesn't break. And then the glass rod, it is a rod that can easily roll off the desk if left unattended. So making sure they're holding onto the glass rod and they don't drop it or bang it or are too rough with it, okay? And you can't do the lab without the glass rod. You're just gonna have to shine the mirror very close and angled down, okay, towards the mirror. But the glass rod makes this a lot easier to see. Another tip is you want to have it dark in the room. If you could control the light in or turn off the light, that obviously will make it easier to see. So now we have the laser, and obvious safety here is you want to make sure students aren't trying to be like a sniper and shining a laser at each other's, like they tend to like to do. Lay down those rules and stick by them, and carefully monitor students using the laser. It's also good to have another student back here with a book to protect from, as it's reflected off, it's not accidentally shining at anybody. These can be dangerous. We know if it's shined in someone's eye, it will cause damage. So you need to go over those rules, lay down those boundaries, stick to them, go over the safety, very important. So the student, their partner is going to trace the incident ray, the reflected ray. Another tip to give students is if they hold the laser kind of pointed down a little bit as it goes into the glass rod, you'll be able to see this incident ray a little bit easier. So, have them kind of finagle how they're holding it until they could really see a good incident reflected ray. And, aiming at that normal line as they change angles, making sure it's at the same point of reference here. And they're going to notice the angles, are changing the same. And that's the main takeaway you want students to come away with when they're finished. You want them to come away with, what the chapter is going to basically go over with them. And if we take a look at the reading in the chapter, so we'll skip ahead, basically they want students to come away with the concept that the angle of reflection is the same as the angle of incidence. And that's the main thing they need to know and the main thing they're going to be testing on. I like to kind of have that, solidified in their notes. So first thing, if you have protractors available, and you could teach them how to measure these angles so they could see that the angles are the same. But even if, some students have difficulty using the protractors, or even if you don't have them available, at least qualitatively, they should notice these angles are the same. And that's the main takeaway you want to get. And I usually show them a slide like this and have them copy it and discuss what they noticed and, label these things. So that's the main takeaway from Section 6 and a couple tips for you there. Now, moving into Section 8. Now, Section 8 is going to cover refraction, the refraction of light. And important concept students need to know. So let's take a look let's fast forward here. Again, skipping section 7, it is reinforcement of reflection, but curved mirrors, not going to be, heavily tested on that. So it is something you could kind of skip over if you're running short on time. Chapter opens up with an interesting phenomenon, looking into a fish tank, looking into water. Things aren't always quite where they seem when you look into that. Why is that? Another thing I like to show students is if I have something set up at the front of a table here, like a straw in water or a ruler in water, a spoon in water. Why does it look like that? And start discussing it. And I like to go through step by step with students how to perform this lab. I like to have step-by-step instructions because even though as they go through and read it, they tend to get a little bit lost in how to do this and how to really take away from this lab. So we go through step-by-step and start labeling things, and then we break it down in our notes and break down the definition of refraction and why it happens and what is this index of refraction all about and what does that mean when light goes into different materials. So I like to break that down a bit more, but inside the actual chapter there is some reading that students need to do first, and then you could kind of further reinforce that with your notes. So go through the reading and then really talk about that index of refraction, what that means, and what they can infer from that. So I just want to show you little tips about setting this up in this next little video here as far as how to do this. So the kit comes with this little acrylic square. Now, if for some reason you don't have those laying around, you could probably make some. I know in active physics, the older editions, they actually had you do some out of gelatin. Get a thin container, put some gelatin, Jello in there, cut it into squares, and then you could shine their light through that. So a couple tips here. Again, talk about safety, but you want to shine through at an angle. If you're shining straight at it, as I'll show you, you're not really going to see any refraction. You have to have that angle so you can see the change in the angle there. And there's going to be some reflection off of that, but you want students to concentrate on the light passing through. You don't want them concentrating on the reflection for this activity. You want them drawing the light passing through, and then you want them to focus on, what's happening there as the light passes through. So they're going to draw that, and they're going to connect the line. They're going to connect the line. I have to have them use a ruler, get a nice straight line there. And then what they'll notice is it doesn't go straight through. There's a little bit of a bend there. Okay, so when you draw those normal lines, you should notice a little bit of a bend. And so then you could go to the read-in and then to the slide and talk about why that's happening. Okay, so that's refraction of light. And there's some great resources to reinforce this. Again, PhET has this great bending of light lab you might want to do with your students. Take a day to do this lab with students if you have computers available, changing the material. So you could talk about both reflection and refraction with this PhET lab. Really awesome. And then another really fun resource is at games.erdener.org. It's a laser reflection game. And students have to place objects, in the appropriate place, making the light, manipulate them, make sure the light reflects to light up a light bulb. There's all sorts of different levels here. So this is a lot of fun to do with the students. And this is something that you might want to try with them if you have some extra time, okay? So games.erdener.org, another great resource to use to reinforce reflection and refraction, two very important concepts students need to know. So I hope you got something out of this, and enjoy.